Hello, my name is Mark Gibson, and you're listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, a weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Very good morning, and you're welcome to today's Signpost webinar. Before we go any further this morning, I'd just like to bring to your attention that the RDS, Irish Forestry and Forest and Woodland Awards, the date for the application for the awards has been extended to Monday the 7th of October, and the prize fund is €12,000, and the awards promote the economic, environmental and social benefits of forestry and farming. And there are 4 prize categories, and you can find out more by visiting the RDS website, rds.ie, and full details and application forms are available on the site. And so we do encourage farmers, or if you have clients or anyone, a neighbour that you think might be eligible, please do share that with them. So to move on to today's presentation, we're delighted to be joined by Sinéad Grimes, who is the project manager of the North Connemara locally led Agri-Environmental scheme, or should I say past tense, was the project manager, because the project has since ended in March 2023. It's a European innovation partnership, and it's a integrated local farmers with individuals from the agri-food industry to tackle the decline of economic and social viability of farming in this environmentally important area of Ireland. And Sinéad, you're very good to join us and share some of the outcomes from the project. And we're also joined by Dr. Keena, who is our countryside management specialist in Teagasc, who I know has been working closely with that project and many other operational groups across Ireland. And Catherine, delighted to have you to assist us with the questions later on. And hopefully we'll have a bit of a discussion about this project and maybe the implications for other projects around the country. So Sinéad, maybe before we start into your presentation, you could tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing now and even what brought you to being involved in that project.
Yeah, and first of all, thanks a million, Mark, and also to Catherine and Yvonne behind the scenes there. It's great to get this opportunity because, as I was saying to Catherine earlier, sometimes you put the head down and you're doing the work and you don't get the chance to actually share the knowledge and share, the experiences of what we actually achieved. So, yeah, how did I come into this? A little bit of an accident, really. It was really being project managed by Joseph Mannion. Joseph worked on this for 2.5 years. So really most of what I'm presenting today, the kudos for all of that would go to Joseph. I took over then for the last 6 months of the project. I was already running an EIP on farm health and safety. So I knew the farmers, I knew the run of things. I'd been helping Joe and Kathy. Kathy Connolly was the person who helped Joseph do the habitat service. She was the ecologist on the project. So really I fell into the role. So I think Joseph was very smart and left with me to do the final report and all the paperwork. So he got out at the right time. But it was hugely interesting. So I don't blame him. It was a great thing to be involved in. It was a really great experience.
Great. And just, in case, you're sure you're covering it in your presentation, but for those who are new to this concept of EIPs, maybe could you just tell us what's the concept?
First off, I think if anybody out there is thinking of going for an EIP, I would heartily recommend that you do. Across everything from the experience of setting it up, meeting with the farmers, getting the steering group committee, it's hugely positive. And I think the benefits to the local economy and the local community are like it's very holistic. It's not just in one area. There's great flexibility in them as well. And when you're running as a pilot, you have the flexibility to test out the waters and maybe just to see if something works. Where sometimes if you get funding in other areas, your role is more strict. You can't go outside of that. If you commit to something, you have to stay on course and do it, even if you're finding part the way through, well, this isn't working. And I think that's as much an important finding of these EIPs, that you see what works and what doesn't work. And when something doesn't work, it's not a failure. Like you're finding out and you're gathering more knowledge in that.
So that's space for discovery along the way, which is
exactly,
really
yeah.
positive.
And the EIPs are a great tool for that.
This is,
again, the locally led aspect of these is what really works.
Yes, yes. So, Sinead, we'll hand over to you. Looking forward to your presentation, and we'll take questions from our audience afterwards. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks a million, Mark. I do have a good few slides here, but I will power through them, and I'm going to do this speed talking now. So as I mentioned here, Joseph Mannion and Kathy Connolly were the project manager and project ecologist for the first 2.5 years of this. So most of what I'll be sharing today was done under their watch. I then joined for the last 6 months. So, and I should go back to that. I think we deserve a prize for the longest name of an EIP ever. So instead of saying that full title, I'll just call it the NCLLAES. That's the North Connemara locally led Agri-Environmental scheme. The lead applicant was Forum Connemara. So that's who I'm employed by, a former community development company in the west of Ireland. We would deliver several programs, including the Leaders, SICAP. And we have a social enterprise. We run the labour activation programme. So the EIP just sat nicely in that we were already well established in the area, and we had good relationships there with the farming community. So what were the aims and objectives? Sorry. So the main aim was to tackle the decline in the economic and social viability of farming in this hugely environmentally important area of Connemara. And again, it was important to us to use a ground-up approach. Everything we did had to be sustainable, it had to be practical and achievable. We also had, the secondary aims of improving communication, knowledge sharing, and most importantly, again, to improve the ecologically sensitive area, to improve the biodiversity in this area. We couldn't have done this without our steering group. We were very, very lucky to have a very engaged group with a wide range of skills from, and we were delighted to have yourself, Catherine, on the board, and also Ivan Kelly. But it was great to have farmers who were really kind of leaders in the community as well. We had Brendan Joyce, Eamon Nee, and Martin Gavin from Lenan. They worked well, and it was with the farmers and Joseph and Kathy and the steering group who really came up with the initiatives that we took on. So we operated in, there was 2 special areas of conservation. And at the start, we had took on 96 participants. And this increased just to 115 in 2022 by the end of the scheme. Just to say, this is the area that we operated in. And when you look at that, some of these place names are iconic, and I think when people think of Connemara, automatically you're going to think of the peatlands, the mountains, the wild coastline. And Connemara, no doubt, it is a very beautiful place, but there's more to it than its scenery. It's a hugely important area for biodiversity. You have the native woodlands here in Very Clare. You have the mock air habitats along the coast. It's one of the last places in Ireland you'll hear the corncrake. And there's remaining populations of the freshwater pearl mussel. But equally as important as that biodiversity are the people and their way of life in this area. And I think this EIP sought to encompass all of that. And I think, I'm happy to say, I think we did. There was challenges. The main challenges for us were, there are low farm incomes in hill farming. To put this in context, we did a survey of up to 100 farmers before we started. 93% of the farmers were hill farmers, 88 of those were sheep farmers, and 68% had second jobs. So we were working with people who were time poor, and that's why everything that we tried to implement had to be achievable within a certain time frame and a certain cost. The fact that it is upland farming, there's reduced land as well for the farming, and animal management is hugely important in that. Again, another challenge was the absence of up-to-date habitat information. If we're trying to improve biodiversity, we have to know where we're starting from. So that's something that we sought to address. Again, just that this was a 3-year project, while it might seem a long time, it's not actually a lot when you have to measure the changes that you've put in place. So how did we get about this? Well, the first thing we undertook was habitat surveys. This project, even when I say it started in May 2019, and we operated through COVID times. So there was a lot that we couldn't do. But thankfully, walking in Connemara in that time was one of the things we could do. So Kathy and Joe went out and they surveyed 10,000 hectares of the farmlands in Connemara during that time. I will cover that a little bit later. These surveys then led to suggestions for improvements in biodiversity on each of those areas. We also tackled what started out as a sheep scheme, like a sheep improvement scheme, but as I say, 88% of our farmers were sheep farmers. So we had to add something for the other 22. So in 2021, we added cattle and equine to the livestock improvement scheme. We did group management, which by that we mean training and workshops. This was hugely important. If you think of us coming out of COVID, we really needed something to engage farmers and add a whole social element to the scheme. Thankfully, that worked really, really well. And the training especially went down very well with the farmers. Community involvement, we looked and we knew that farmers don't operate in isolation. No man is an island. And unless we brought the community along in addressing some of these issues, we would be doing the farmers a disservice. So we worked with the schools, we worked with the Tidy Towns group. And again, I'll cover that a little bit later. One of the main areas, and thankfully an area that we're continuing to work on in Forum Connemara, is the invasive species control. For Connemara, rhododendron ponticum was seen to be the main threat. And again, I'll go into detail on how we tackle that and how we're continuing to tackle that. As I alluded to earlier, the people were as important in this EIP as anything else. And we did decide to, and this was a change as well, it wasn't in our original plan, but it came about. I was speaking to a farmer and he was worried, that when his dad passed on, that the knowledge he had of like the name of that hill or that valley, that would go with him. And he put it in a lovely way. He said, and I don't know if this is his phrase or not, but he said, when you lose an elder, you lose a library. And talking to Joe, we decided, that this is really something that we want to concentrate on. And we did a little heritage gathering, a series of videos, and we put them up on a Facebook page. I'll present on that a little later. And because this is an EIP, innovation was at the forefront. We did try to include a lot of innovation in this. So again, I have a few slides on that later. As an overall picture, this is just a slide I did for the gathering of the EIPs. I think it was Athlone. So it's a little out of date, but just it'll give you a picture of what we did. So the habitat surveys, as I mentioned, 10,000 hectares were surveyed, and 200 plant species were recorded in that time. And from that, the habitat improvement came. We covered training. We did training with over 250 farmers, ranging from sheep shearing, drone usage, pesticide and chainsaw skills, among others. Group meetings were just as important, and this is where we really listened to the farmers. We wanted to know what was worrying them, what did they feel they could improve on. Where did they need extra knowledge? So, for example, we would have got a vet to talk about dosing and animal safety and handling, and we got a financial expert to talk specifically on farm finances. The community engagement, as I mentioned, we talked with the schools and ran programs in the primary and secondary schools, the tidy towns. The next one down there says blackface sheep, and again, this is what I was talking about earlier. The beauty in the EIP is its flexibility. We started off with blackface sheep as the initiative because the blackface sheep would be the best breed really for the uplands. But as we worked with the farmers, we realised, we did need to expand that into other breeds of sheep as well as cattle and equine. The targeting invasive. So at the time of writing this, we had a team of 6 operatives who were employed directly by the EIP. And again, I'm really proud to say that has expanded, and I'll cover that later. So just to get into each of these then in a little bit more detail, the habitat surveys. This was important to create a baseline of data so that we could see where we were starting from and make arrangements with the farmers on how each of their plots could be improved for biodiversity. There was a bespoke habitat scorecard created. Now it's too unwieldy to put on a nice slide. I know people might be interested in seeing that, but if you imagine a large spreadsheet with 200 species on it, it didn't make for a pretty slide. But just to maybe explain how it was done, the surveys were done yearly. This plot would be walked in a W shape, and you would just note all of the species you would see. We used the DAFOR scale, DAFOR, and as we walked, we would see what species were dominant. That's the D. So that would be a species that would cover 2/3 of the plot, for example. Abundant, anything that would be a third of the plot. So everywhere you look, you see this plant. Frequent then would be everywhere you look, you see some of this. Occasional, you don't have to search too hard to find it, but you will spot it. And rare means it's only recorded a few times, maybe even once during the survey. It doesn't necessarily mean a rare plant. So that was done. One of the interesting things that we found during the habitat surveys was that 15% of the area surveyed had invasive species on it. So I think that, that is an important finding. The last 2 points there, equally as important as getting a baseline, was starting the conversation with farmers and sharing the knowledge. Say for example, why is rhododendron a threat? Why should we be removing from the area, and why any monoculture should be managed? So that was as important really as getting the baseline. The habitat surveys then led to habitat improvements. So again, nothing was ever forced on any of the farmers. We worked with them, shoulder to shoulder, deciding what they could implement based on the time and the availability of the stock and agreement from neighbours. Again, I'll cover that in a little. So the farmers could choose to improve their farm infrastructure, such as fixing fences, gates, water troughs, or sheep pens. And these improvements made farming easier. It helped the farmers better manage their stock and ensured the animals were safer, easier to handle, and maybe kept away from some important areas of biodiversity. We also did breeding, like control stock placement. I will cover that in more detail. The use of technology was important here as well. For example, GPS shepherding was one of the things we trialled, and monoculture control. So we did identify areas that needed to have any one particular dominant species addressed. So you can't talk about Connemara or any IP in Connemara without addressing commonage. Over 75% of the farmers on the scheme operated on commonage lands. We were lucky mostly, but completing any action in commonage can be challenging due to multiple stakeholders. Because of that, we treated each farmer as an individual and allowed them to choose what they wanted to implement and where they had the necessary permission. It wasn't fair to to penalise a farmer if we told them to do something and they couldn't because of lack of agreement. So we ensured that that wasn't the case. And to encourage collaboration, farmers received 1.5 times the original incentive when working with other commonage shareholders. I suppose to give an example of that with fencing, if you fenced on your private land, you got a payment of €5 per metre. But if you fenced or repaired fences on a commonage area, you would get €8 per metre. So that approach was successful. It brought farmers together to improve shared boundaries, fences, infrastructure, and that actually led to the strategy of using sheep breeding patterns to influence their placement on the hill. When a fence couldn't go in, maybe we could still influence where the flock would graze on the upper heights in the hills. Before I go on, I'll talk a little bit more about that, the sheep placement, but I just wanted to give a concrete example of how the payments were made. Equally as important as all the work on the ground is the work that gets done in the office with the paperwork, and this was what we would have had to keep per farmer, and this was what we would have had to produce and present back to the Department of Agriculture. And actually, I just want to say thanks. The department were so easy to work with. They really gave help when we needed it. They were flexible when we needed them to be flexible. It was a pleasure working with them. So here, this is an actual farmer score. This is what the track of their payments for this particular year. I think it's 2022. So here, this farmer chose to do fencing as his habitat improvement, and this would have been, agreed with us. You can see here his habitat score. He was getting an average of 80 on his plots that had the surveys done on them. One of the things he needed to improve on was the rhododendron control. We suggested he put fencing down at the shoreline. So the area to be fenced was 565 metres at €5 per metre. That came to, over our max payment. So the maximum payment which we would have come to from our budget was 2,400 at €800 per annum. So he was over that. So he would have got €800 per annum to go towards the fencing. You can see there that's down as his farm improvement. The booklet there at the bottom refers to the sheep scheme. So he would have been involved in that as well, and he would have received a payment of €800 to keep a booklet detailing what he was doing for herd improvement there. The habitat survey, he would have got €783 for that. Now, this wasn't all the payments he would have got, maybe payments per group scheme as well. But just to give you an overview of this is how the results-based payments tied back to all of these initiatives. The next screen here, this shows exactly how this farmer got his payment for the habitat survey. So he had 6 plots, they were surveyed. This was the payment for 2022. Out of the 6 plots, you can see, he is scoring high. Rhododendron would be the reason that he had lost any points there. So overall score was 78.33. We multiplied that by 10, and that gave him the payment for 783. We actually owe him 33 cents, so I'll have to go back. Fencing, as I mentioned, was one of the most popular habitat improvements that the farmers did. So you can see there, don't bother reading it out. You can see yourself the amount of fencing that was done. So much was done on hills, so much by roadside. And again, it's not just about putting up fences. A lot of them were repaired, which, is of benefit to the farmers, especially on commonage areas as well. Those pictures, I was going to apologise for them being a bit fuzzy, but these were taken by the farmers and sent in to us as proof that the fencing was done. And we would have ground-proofed a lot of this as well. Just to concentrate a bit on the blackface sheep initiative, which, as I said, expanded into the sheep scheme, and in 2021, cattle and equine. The idea behind this was really to increase productivity, the health of the flock, its marketability. By that we mean that we would have encouraged people to sign up to Board BIA. The use of technology in drone shepherding and GPS shepherding was used, and we would have trained people in that. And it is great to see. I was actually talking to the farmer who used the GPS shepherding, and I met him in Oughterard. He was able to show me on a screen where the flock was on the screen, just miles away, and he said, "Yeah, it's working really, really well." The hill system, we kind of went back to the traditional methods, but with the new technology to assist that. But the hill system works. We just wanted to ensure that people were following the best practice. The group management, this again, as I said earlier, was very important after coming out of COVID. We wanted to ensure that we had an excuse to bring people together. We didn't need an excuse. People came out and met, and it was great. I think sometimes if we had a workshop, the cup of tea afterwards was nearly longer than the workshop. So during that time, we would have delivered sheep shearing, horticulture, animal handling, skills dosing, the drone techs, pesticide and chainsaw. I think I have a slide here. This will show you exactly what was delivered and when. And you can see there that this initiative was impacted by COVID. We couldn't really get started onto this. I think the first one there is number 8, the rhododendron control, which was outdoors in October 2020. So thankfully we did more than make up for the late start. You can see how many people were trained there, and you can see from this the most popular were the rhododendron control, the pesticide application, and the chainsaw. I suppose it's actually just worth pointing out there that sometimes people got more than just the training. They did get the social side of things, but just number 1 there, the electric sheep shearing. George Graham, I'm sure many of the listeners will know him. George is great. He'll address depression and suicide awareness at the same time. And when you're talking shoulder to shoulder to farmers about that, I think that really has an impact. So again, it's great to have somebody like George on board. Community involvement, I've kind of already covered this. Very, very important to include the community in your EIPs if you are going down that route. Social media had been one of the ways that we would have got the word out there. We also did a radio show on Connemara Community Radio. Thanks to Catherine, she was one of the people that I interviewed there for that show. But it was an important way of getting the message across. I've mentioned this already. We had this aspect of gathering the heritage, and in 2022 we added this initiative. So this was the Connemara Rural Heritage Gathering and Recording. It was just the discussions with the farmers we were having in the field by the roadside to just reveal such a rich farming history, and we just wanted to capture that. So this project gave a glimpse into the lives of Connemara farmers, and from agri-ecological to socio-cultural. The Facebook page is still active there, and I just have on the next slide, this will give you an idea of some of the people who engaged, and a huge thanks to Lainey Mannion and Lisa Kane who carried out these interviews, and to everyone who took part. You have Mikey up there at the top with the hands. He's describing building haycocks, and the couple below just discussing life and social interactions and how they had changed. Next to them there, Joe Kane, he covered traditional hill farming methods, and above him there, Daniel Barty, he was talking about filming. He was there, the filming of the field. And if you ever want to know how they did that scene where the cows jump over the cliff, it might ruin it for you, but you can watch that video. I won't spoil it. Invasive species. This is something that I'm delighted to say we're still working on. Rhododendron was identified as the most invasive, the most common invasive in Connemara. We worked with Quilcha National Parks and the Wild Atlantic Nature Life IP to tackle the problem. As part of the EIP, we initially started training farmers to tackle it on their own lands, and we would pay them. They submitted timesheets, and we would pay them for their time. I think 48 farmers took on that initiative. The picture here just to explain that this is how we would treat it. It's called the stem treatment method. So each of the stems of the rhododendron would have to be marked either with, this was done with the chainsaw, so it's scraped with the chainsaw. You can equally do it with a drill or a hatchet. And once you have that scraping done, it's important to apply herbicide, as soon as possible. And you can see there, we actually add a blue dye to the mix so that you can clearly see where it's been applied. We would do it with the handheld applicator in a jet stream, not a mist, so there's no collateral damage. This was very important to us so that we'd make sure that we weren't creating a problem by addressing another. So again, an ecologist would come and ensured before and after pictures, and that there was no collateral damage on the mosses or grasses that were grown at the base of the plants. It was hugely successful. However, we also saw that this method of controlling it was not going to work fast enough, because the farmers already had enough on their plate with their, a lot of them had a second job as well. So at this time, we made contact with a group in Lenan. They were led by Martin Gavin, and he was working with the Wild Atlantic Nature Life IP. And he had a team of 5 operatives working with them, and they were self-employed, and that was working very well. It worked out so nicely that when their funding was drying up, we had funding available. So we worked with them, and we took on their 5 operatives and another 5 with them, and we trained them up in chainsaw and herbicide use, pesticide use. So we had 10 operatives then, and over 16 weeks, we went to 16 farmers. Each farmer got a week of this crew of 10 lads with chainsaws, and they did incredible work. This was a brilliant way to tackle a problem. It was a local solution to a local ecological problem, creating 10 well-paid, jobs, which I'm delighted to say all of those lads in the picture there, they're still with us, and we actually have 20 on our team today. How did we do it? As I said, it's stem treatment, so making several cuts in the base and applying the herbicide mix as soon as possible. Stump treatment was also a method where we'd cut at the base and apply the herbicide then to the stump face. Dilution would depend on the size and severity of the infestation, 7 or 10 to 1 for the large plants and 20 to 1 for the smaller plants. As I say, it was very successful. The team of operatives covered 123 hectares in 16 weeks. In total then, I say approximately 50, but it is 48, had 323 hectares done as a result of this initiative. Now, while that's fantastic, if you remember what I said earlier, that of the 10,000 hectares surveyed, 1,500 hectares had invasives. So you can see that there's still a lot of work to do, and it needed to continue at a larger scale. And I'm glad to say this is the project I'm working on at the minute with the 20 operatives. It's funded by the National Parks via the Wild Atlantic Nature Life IP. Excuse me, it's in its 2nd year. And currently we have 20 operatives and 4 support and admin workers. We work in 3 SACs, and we control invasive rhododendron in Mayo and Galway. The SACs are the Muilry, Sheffrey, Erif Complex, the 12 Bens Garn Complex, and Connemara Bog Complex. So we're now working in areas of Mayo and North and South Connemara. You can't talk about EIPs without covering innovation, and I'm just watching the time here, so I'm going to race through the next few slides. Towards the end of the scheme, we did add some extra initiatives. one of the farmers just said to me, Sinead, if you can come up with something to do with wool and rushes, we're all going to be millionaires. So we kind of went away and thought about that. And at the time, there was an EIP making biochar from rushes. So we went down to Burnley in Clare, and we wondered, how can we incorporate this into our EIP? Because, as I said to Bernard, we have all the biomass in Connemara. You can see it here in the form of dead rhododendron. So we built this kiln. We were lucky that there was a student from America visiting Letterfrack at the time who had knowledge of this, and one of our operatives was a welder. So it just happened very, there was a nice synergy there. So we built this kiln. It's the only one of its type in Ireland. The idea behind this was we wanted to bring this into the field where the biomass was, not the other way around. We wanted it to be light enough to be able to be towed behind a truck, possibly a quad. So this was made especially for this purpose. We've made biochar from the rhododendron brash, and we're currently getting that tested. The test will just show how much carbon is locked in that, and how good a quality it is, so that it can be used. Again, I have another slide to explain a bit more about biochar. With regards to wool, we came up with an idea that it was being used in Fermanagh, and there was a lady in England using wool as for bog restoration. Currently, in bog restoration, they would use coir logs, and these coir logs are made with coconut husks, and these are shipped from India and Sri Lanka. And I was thinking, how does that make sense? The carbon footprint of bringing them over so that we can sink carbon just doesn't make sense, really. Whereas we could use a local product in a local restoration, and that hopefully would put more value on the wool. We actually also have secured funding via the Doulra project to explore this, as well as other initiatives, such as we're making a solid material from wool with the bioresin. And again, hopefully we're going to, this material will be like a fiberglass. It'll be an alternative to plastic, and the funding we got is to use this as an alternative to plastic dams in bog restoration, and that would be just one of the uses. So we currently have testing in place for that. Just a little bit more about the biochar. So what is biochar? It is just a form of carbon. So instead of burning it and making ash and releasing all of the carbon into the air, what biochar is, you bake it, really. The scientific term is pyrolysis, and that means burning in the absence of oxygen. So if you can even see there's a black log in this kiln, you can just start to see traces of white there. This is what we would watch for, and when we see traces of white, that means oxygen is getting in. That's when we need to top load again and put in small sticks, so that it's called flame cap kiln. So the burning is at the top and the baking is all of the larger logs at the bottom. That's how you make it. The uses for this product are multi. It can be used as fertilizer, it can be used for water filtration, and 1 ton of biochar equates to 3 tons of carbon sequestration. So literally you're taking the carbon out of the carbon cycle. It's the most stable form of carbon you can get, and that can be put back and incorporated into the soil. It's a soil improver, and it aerates the soil. So this is perfect for addressing the compaction of the soil under heavily infested areas of rhododendron. So if we treat the rhododendron and leave it standing, that's only part of the problem. Without addressing soil condition underneath that, we can't replant. So again, this is hopefully a nod towards actually addressing this problem further down the line. The way that we made this kiln, again, had to address just labour efficiency, because we're aware farmers don't have 8 hours to stand looking at a fire. So a 3-person crew in 4 hours can make 1.25 tons of biochar. And that is actually more than some of the more advanced extra retort kilns. Just to go through, this is again a little bit more just to show you the biochar when it's finished. this image up here is the biochar under a microscope, and you can see the pores, and it's in these pores that all the microbiomes will live, and that's what improves the condition of the soil. On the wool usage and research, these are the coir logs I spoke about, and we're hoping to replace it with our own version of this as wool. I'll just show you. It doesn't look like much, but this is a before and after picture. So that simply is sandbags, 3 sandbags stuffed with wool and stuffed in a bag. Nothing more scientific than that. But when you see the difference, this can show you how it can trap the water in the bag. That's all we want to do, slow down the flow of water on the bag so that the sphagnum moss and grasses can catch hold and they will grow faster in this. Innovation, I've kind of already mentioned the use of the GPS shepherding. I'm going to fly through the rest of these slides. The achievements, so over the 3 years, what have we achieved? We engaged 115 farmers in the conversation about biodiversity and improving habitats. It created employment for 13 full-time staff, 2 part-time. There was additional income for the local participating farmers and the communities. The habitat surveys, control of invasive species, training of local farmers, again, workforce development, raising awareness and improving farm productivity through the livestock management. And again, the whole holistic impact of all of that together, it did have a good effect on the local community. 1.4 million was the overall budget, and I guess this slide just shows that the majority of that did go back into the farmers' pockets. Again, quickly our findings: livestock as biodiversity tools, really sheep and cattle are ecological tools if used properly, and farmers should be rewarded for using best practice, using the rotational grazing. Locally led approach works. Of that survey we did, 99% agreed that the locally led results-based payment scheme works. The locally led schemes are better able to focus on local areas and specific problems in an area. And I think, yeah, I'll just skip to the last one there. Farmers are interested in the locally led approach, and I think they welcome the opportunity to try out actions on the farm and to learn new skills. So that's it really. I think the whole thing we would take away from this again is giving ownership back to the farmer, working together. The ground up approach really does get things done, and to bring the community along with you, including the young farmers for tomorrow. That's it. I think the last slide there just kind of shows the progression. It's the same logo from it's the primary school competition there to an EIP to a project that's really of national importance now. So I think that's it.
Thank you, Sinead. What a wonderful project. I mean, it really sounds like you took a very holistic approach. I know you've used that word a few times throughout the presentation, but you know, you're not just looking at one particular aspect in isolation. And I suppose it recognizes that, you know, these are complex systems, and you know, where people are interacting with the landscape, and you have to look beyond just one narrow part of that system. I really like the way that you're looking at building that capacity amongst the farmers as well. That's the training programs that you've offered as well. So look, it's just a really inspirational project, and congratulations to you and the team on delivering as much as you did in a relatively short period of time. So it's,
yeah. And again, I do have to say the team were excellent. Like Joseph Mannion and Kathy Connolly would have done the bulk of this. So I did hope that Joseph would be here today, but he's actually working with the Acres scheme now. So he's a busy man.
Yes. So just I suppose a general question before we get into the main questions, and I know we do have a few coming through there. You talked about some of the sort of learnings there from the project and the importance of that bottom-up approach. Were there any sort of recommendations that you'd have from the project that others could learn from in terms of maybe at a policy level, or what you think could actually benefit other schemes into the future, or indeed policy measures?
It's a good question. I guess if I was to give any advice, sometimes people wait to have that public meeting until they have all the answers. You know, nobody wants to stand up and not have the answers. I do think having a public meeting early to get the questions which are going to guide your answers is actually as important as having everything laid out before you start. I think probably the best piece of advice is never fall in love with the project plan, because it is going to go out the window the minute you actually start to implement it. Like, to be flexible is key, definitely. And to take on differences of opinion as well. That, you know, I think the black-faced sheep is a good example of maybe one of the ways that we changed. Like, the steering committee had thought that was the way to go, but then when talking to the farmers, we realised no, there is actually benefit to other breeds of sheep in this area as well. So,
and the importance of that relationship with the funding agency as well, that they are prepared to be, I suppose, agile or responsive to those changes along the way. That seems to be a big difference in the EIP approach, the operational group approach, where you know, you're keeping that dialogue open with your funder, I suppose, is important. Catherine, we have some very nice questions coming in from our audience.
Yeah, and very nice compliments. Just a couple of kind of key things that came through there. Very encouraging for the future of farms in the West. And another nice one, acknowledging the people and their heritage and impact over millennia on the landscape is a good start. So you have a few good things there. One very quick one there. I know you showed the photos, but the question was, do you use geotagged photos, or was it just where the photos the farmers sent in to show they had the fencing done?
I mean, there's an element of trust. Like, we know the areas, we would walk the land before, and so we know if that field is where we agreed that the fence would be put. There was no need for overly complex. No, we just had to.
That's lovely. Yeah, I'll keep moving here. And just a small comment there around the fencing. A question about how fencing improves habitat condition.
It can in certain areas, and it is a good question. If you remember back to the slide I showed with the payments, that farmer was on a shoreline. So when you let animals near water, you can be impacting the water quality. It could be a riparian bank, or it could be like we operated in areas of mocker grass, which we needed to ensure that say some of the herd wasn't going right up until that area. So fencing off areas, fencing off water in particular. And again, just that term, good fences make good neighbours, you know, having those boundaries as well is important.
I think essential for stock control, isn't it, if you're trying to graze the areas right? So it's just a nice clarification there. Just go back, a good few on the invasives. Did you do anything on Japanese knotweed?
No. Again, yes, farmers would have on their own land, but as when we have the operatives, we just concentrated on the rhododendron.
Yeah, and any option for control of rhododendron on organic farms who can't use herbicides?
Yeah, this is a real. I think a lot of work needs to be done in this area, and we as the Doulra project are very open to talking to anybody about that. We have done trials. One of the trials was stump cutting the rhododendron and covering it with wool, just a raw wool fleece. It worked. Now, can we say that that's going to work on a broader scale? No, not until we do more trials. Another was using copper nails. It did knock the plant back, but it didn't kill it. We do have other things that we want to test. One is kind of out there. It's a little new and nobody has tried it, but it's called ABA acid or abscisic acid, and this is a natural plant hormone. If you put this on a plant, it automatically knocks it back. It thinks it's in drought. It affects the stomata on the leaf. and it respires faster. So the plant shuts down, but it doesn't flower. And that, as we all know, is what we want to happen with rhododendron. Again, because it hasn't been trialled, it's a difficult one. You can't just go out and start spraying in an SAC without fully knowing. So more trials are needed on that. But we do have ideas. Again, because of the area we work in, it's mostly peatlands. We weren't going to promote going out and digging it up and releasing the carbon from the soil. So we didn't do much mechanical. So no areas were done with diggers or. So I guess
it's an area for looking at.
It's an area for trials.
And again, a follow on there when you mentioned the sheep. I know sheep's wool is a category 3 animal byproduct under the animal byproduct regulations, the ABP.
Exactly.
But do you have to treat the wool in any way when you're using it, or maybe have you faced that challenge yet?
Yeah. Currently, I'm looking at it is exactly as you said. It's classified as a waste. However, you can get around that if you can prove that waste product has a use. You can get it classified as a byproduct. So if it has a use in its current state, and wool, to anybody out there who's listening, if you are planting trees, for example, and you don't want deer to come. Using the raw wool, the smell of it, deer don't like that. They don't like the tongue feel. They don't like the lanolin. So it's supposed to repel deer. I know people say it's not an exact science, but if you then do some small treatment on it, you can classify it as a byproduct. So just cold water washing. It's called cold water suint fermenting, and the suint and the lanolin saponifies. It creates a soap, so it cleans itself automatically. Now, I have got testing done on raw fleece to see what's in it, what can be detrimental to the environment and to humans. So that is all very, very thankful to the Wild Atlantic Nature Life IP. We got 15,000 worth of seed funding. It sounds like a lot of money, but when you get involved labs, that money really dwindles very fast. But I thought it was really, really worthwhile to see, can we get wool declassified as a waste product and classified as a byproduct without scouring, because we all know that's not going to work.
Fascinating, Sinead. Yeah. Just a couple more questions. Did the project complete any bird monitoring, ground nesting birds?
That's a really good question, and I think a very, very insightful finding from this is, in all our dealing with invasive species, I think there was one bird nest ever found in a rhododendron tree that we were treating, and it was an old nest. There was nothing in it. So that was one finding. Currently, as I mentioned, we have a team of we had 10 operatives on the EIP, and what they're doing is kind of scrub management, isn't it? Which would be of benefit to ground nesting birds. We have been in touch with another EIP, the Breeding Waders EIP, and Owen Murphy there. So we're going to work with him to ensure that while we're doing one thing, if we can add another feather to the cap, wouldn't that be brilliant? And we can help Owen with training his team. So there's going to be a good knowledge swap there. So yeah, I think that's an area that we're going to improve on.
But just in the general habitat assessment that you did, there wasn't bird monitoring, I don't think, was there?
No, sorry, no.
No, that's grand. And then the question is there still a problem with overgrazing on commonage areas in Connemara? And did the project help with the recovery? I expect it's too soon, but what was your assessment of quality?
It did. Yeah. The problems are both. It's not just overgrazing, there's undergrazing as well. So I just give the example of like a monoculture again with Molinia grass. So when you have sheep, they're not going to eat the Molinia. So, we did encourage livestock replacement as well. So to encourage cattle to come in there, like the Dexters or the Drumming were ideal, the light cattle for those areas. And, the way that the difference in how a sheep eats and how a cow eats, it does help. So with the rotational grazing, that is all something that we would see as very, very important to the uplands and controlling that. So with the overgrazing, that's when we did the breeding placement. So we would encourage farmers to breed from ewes that would forage higher in the hills or forage from areas that had scored well on the habitat scorecard. So if they did a breeding from ewes in those areas, it helped with the overgrazing. And that was a lot of work. It was definitely a lot of work. I know in particular 2 farmers, Joe Keena and Mary Mannion, they did Trojan work on that, and they have seen the difference in their fields.
We've had a few questions here in relation to the biochar element of the project, and is there a source of information that people could find out more? Some people are looking to maybe avail it for rushes.
Yes,
that people bailed.
Whereas it's like I know some people are probably thinking this could be the answer to all of our problems with rushes and furze and gorse and rhododendron. Yes, hopefully. I do have to apologise because there's a website that I'm supposed to have done, but I haven't had the time yet. But the doulraproject.com, I will be putting up information there about biochar, how we make it and its uses. We've had dealings with Irbia as well. I really think this is an area that we need to expand on with farmers. At the moment, everything done with biochar is kind of maybe at a high level. I think we need to bring it into the fields. I think, and now it is dangerous. I'm not going to say it's not. The temperatures that we would create biochar at are dangerous, but in a more controlled manner. I would love to see where there's a mart, there's a biochar kiln. I do think, we should get to people bringing their biomass or having one in an area that can be used by a community. We're probably a little bit away from that. As I say, currently University of Limerick have been testing the biochar that we made. We wanted to ensure that because we use glyphosate in the rhododendron brash and just rhododendron by itself having granotoxin in it, we want to ensure that what we make is a quality product.
Yes.
I think watch this space, and hopefully if I get the time I'll update that website. But I do want to do a few leaflets and we'll put it out there as well. Thanks, Yvonne. That's the Forum Connemara website there.
Great. Look, I'm sorry we have to finish so early because you had some more time. If we had some more time, we'd love to have heard more on the slides on the presentation because there's such a rich findings from the project and the fact that you had people involved from the get-go, and that's what I love about these operational groups is that that bottom-up approach to it. So again, congratulations to you and the team, and thanks for joining us today. Catherine, thanks for helping out with the questions and indeed for organising many of the speakers that we're having in the series, and Yvonne Maher in the background as well for helping with the technology today. Just a final reminder there, if you joined us late in the webinar, the RDS Irish Forest and Woodland Awards have an open call for applications for their prize or awards. The final call for entries is the 7th of October. So do log on to the RDS website or the Teagasc website also has information about those awards, and you can check that out. There's a nice award ceremony that takes place next year in the RDS then, so finalists are invited along to that. Sinead, thanks again, and best of luck with the Doulra project, and we'd love to have you back maybe to tell us more about that when you're a little bit more into it, and even just to get a sense of what's going on and so that people can track and see what's check you out on social media and the website. And so next week we're going to be joined by Fergal Monaghan, who's going to be talking to us about non-productive investments as part of the ACRES cooperation areas, and so Fergal will be giving us an overview of what's happening there. So do join us next Friday morning, and until then, thanks very much.
You've been listening to the podcast version of the Teagasc Signpost Series, the weekly webinar that promotes and examines sustainability in Irish farming. Don't forget to join us live every Friday morning for our latest webinar. For more, visit teagasc.ie. And you can also rate, review, and subscribe to the Signpost series on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Mark Gibson, and thanks for listening.